Hey there, Parker X listeners. This is Brett Wood coming at you today with another blast from the past episode from early 2020, recorded at the Mid-South Parking and Transportation Conference in Florida, pre-COVID. Today I'm talking with my really good friend, Gary Means, the Executive Director of the Lexington Parking Authority in Lexington, Kentucky. Topics we'll cover include how he got started in parking, the overall structure of the Lex Park program, the importance and varied management structures of today's parking organizations, curb management and evolutions in that realm pre-COVID, and his role as the chair-elect on the IPMI board. Hope you enjoy. Hey, this is Brett Wood with Parker X, and today we're sitting with Gary Means, the Executive Director of the Lexington Parking Authority in Lexington, Kentucky. Morning, Gary.
Hey, good morning, Brett. Great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Parker X podcast. Excited to chat with you. We'd like to start off the podcast with just kind of your origin story, how you got into parking and what's your background and got you to Lexington.
Great. Well, again, I'm honored to be with you and get to share a little bit of our story. I did graduate with a degree in parking from the Eastern Kentucky University. Just kidding. I have a degree in broadcasting, actually, from Eastern Kentucky University. Just going back a little further, my dad was in the Air Force, so I've lived all over the place. And I guess the one thing that sort of built into me that I think is applied in later in life, and especially in parking, is I adapt to change well. I make friends pretty well. Have to figure out how to make things work pretty well, just from all the changes that happened as we grew up. But following college, I got into some property management type positions, and one day I saw an ad in the paper from Central Parking System, an operations manager in downtown Lexington. So I applied, got the job, and spent about 12 years with them. Still wasn't even sure that parking was my career. Even 10 to 12 years, I kept thinking, maybe there's something else out there that I'll do. And then the city of Lexington created a parking authority. And when I applied for that and was selected, that's when I decided, hey, I guess this is what I do for a career, what I'm good at. So I've been with the parking authority now, just coming up on 13 years. So I'm a little over 25 years in the industry now.
Nice. And so those 25 years with Central and with the Parking Authority, they've all been spent in Lexington?
I worked in Louisville for a few years as well. So say Kentucky and southern Indiana.
You are the rare bird that was on the operations side that didn't have to pick up and move at the drop of a hat. So
And there was the day, and some of our Central Parking alumni will know and remember this, that if you turn down a opportunity, sometimes that didn't go well for the rest of your career. And I actually turned down 2 really good opportunities because I didn't want to relocate. Well, so it worked out for me. I turned out, even though I moved around a lot and I love to see the world, Kentucky, I'm kind of a Kentucky boy, so it works.
Nothing wrong with that, and it's beautiful up there too. So quick question about your education. So broadcasting, we're talking about television broadcasting, radio broadcasting?
Right. And so a lot of people, when they see that and they know me, and I've been on a lot of boards and done a lot of things where I'm maybe in front of people, they think, well, you must have wanted to be an anchor or something, but not really. I was really into the production aspects. So I enjoyed lighting, camera shots, camera angles, editing. I was into stuff like that. None of that I learned is applicable to today's technology because it's all on the old stuff. So I was good at that then, but I wouldn't be now.
A lot of it's putting the puzzle pieces together, the producing things and making sure everything's in. So a lot of that will apply to parking operations and organizational stuff. So. Well, very cool. So I've had the honor of working with you in Lexington on some stuff in the past few years, and I must say y'all have a really well-run organization up there, and it's an interesting organization in that it's a parking authority. So you're a separate entity from the city. You have an elected board. You're also kind of a hybrid organization where the actual parking authority is a pretty small set of employees, and then buoyed by an outside parking operator. Has it always been that way? Is that how you constructed it from the beginning, or have you kind of evolved into that model?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking about how it came about, because that's something I'm really proud of. We have a great board of directors, and the way our organization is established is a mayor appoints and the council will approve that appointment to our board. And these are citizens who most of the time had no parking experience at all. But the particular group that's been together for a long time has really been forward-thinking, embraced technology. But in the early days, we were starting from scratch. We had no website. The city had been writing tickets still on the old handheld, or handwritten ticket books, and there was absolutely no technology. Meters a lot of them were still the wind-up meters, and some had gone to digital back in the day when you tried to download it on some sort of PDA device or something, but most of the time didn't work. But there, it's wild now that you look back from 12 years, but we had these conversations at the board level. Is it okay for a private company to even place a citation on a vehicle? Shouldn't that be done by the police? So we had to get through a lot of those types of questions early on. But yes, we adopted a model where we were going to basically do a turnkey, full outsource operation for the operations, and the actual parking authority staff is kind of lean and mean, like you said. We've got 3 full-time and a part-time analyst in our parking authority staff, and then outsource everything else. And again, it's not a huge operation. Lexington's not a huge market. Altogether, our operator has around 26, 27 employees, so 32 or so people total when you add in our staff.
And when you first started the authority, it was all on street at that point, right? So you've scaled up to off street, which I also find to be kind of fascinating. You see a lot of cities that they haven't been in the off street parking game, and now they're kind of battling with the private sector, market rates, whatever it may be, to have that off street parking. And so it came about where the parking authority decided they would get into the off street business as well. And how has that influence change in Lexington?
And honestly, some of that came about through mayor changes. So when the vision of creating the parking authority was all things parking should be under one entity, and at the time, this is back in 2006, 2007, there were probably 5 different departments within the city that had their hands in parking. So general services had the garages, and Division of Revenue collected the citation payments and maintained the meters, and police wrote the citations. Traffic engineering would place where loading zones or meters should go. So there's all these different organizations involved. So putting it all under one umbrella sounded good, but there was a mayor that came in right after we took over the on-street piece, and they were uncomfortable with putting the assets of the garages under our care. And it was kind of like, well, hey, there's a lot of value in that. Well, 4 years goes by, and all these garages are starting to get in really bad shape. And so the next mayor came in and said, we need to finish what 2 mayors back's vision was, get all this up underneath one group with a professional at the helm. And so we, did assessments of the garages, and, came up with, there's all these millions of dollars that needs to be done. And it made it even easier for the city to say, oh, hey, look, you guys take those garages, because it's, going to be super expensive to keep them going. So that's kind of the way that progression went. And really, for a small organization, it's kind of cool that it came in bits and pieces, because it gave us time to really get down into the weeds on policies for on-street, while you're not dealing with falling concrete and things in the garages. So we really were able to establish a great base to work from before we took over the garages, which needed a ton of work and upgrades.
Very good. Yeah, that's it's interesting. So when you first started the parking authority, what was the perception of parking in Lexington?
It depends on who you ask. But what was going on at that time was the police were supposed to be doing enforcement. And of course, police have much higher important duties and needs from the community to be busy with. And so I think they would try to, about 2 days a week, assign an officer or two to writing citations. So on that end, what was going on was people were parking all day, and they might get a ticket. They probably won't. So you had the metered spaces were clogged up, mostly with downtown workers. Kind of that same story.
Yep.
If there's no enforcement, that's who's going to be there. Customers say, I can't find a place to park downtown. 10 years later, you'll hear people say, it's so much better since the parking authority came in. You can always find a parking space. And, as you know, that's not just enforcement. It's about rate tweaks and different things that we've done over the years. But that was kind of the condition then. And then the garages were all, old parks equipment, concrete starting to fall, literally some of them being propped up by supports.
That's not good.
It was, really not good. But I sometimes when I say that, it sounds like I really put our city down. But if you think about a council member and people are standing in front of them with all these needs, it's like, well, do we put in new gates, or do we hire a police officer?
That's right.
Or do we fix that bridge that's getting really dangerous on that one road? Or do we purchase new gates for the garages?
That's right. Yeah,
So
and there's so many things that a city and a council and a mayor and even citizens of the city have to think about, that if we can remove some of these smaller decisions about parking, bring them over to the parking authority, it generates revenue that contributes back to these other things and customer service and the experience in the downtown. But it tends to be put to the back burner if it's not,
Right.
part of the true decision-making process. So that's fascinating. So to think about the authority model a little bit, because I'm always fascinated when you think about parking authorities, the first thing that pops into your head is like the larger parking authorities in the Northeast, kind of the big organizations and big kind of standalone monolithic organizations, and the parking authorities we're seeing nowadays are more like yours or more like Adam Jones out in Tempe, that are the smaller, hybrid, customer-focused type of parking authority. And what benefit do you see from that type of organization?
Well, if you just sort of put kind of a grid or a matrix together and took a look at, what are the possibilities when it's kept in-house, a department of the city, and we have some good friends in the industry that are doing a great job in some cities, but a lot of times their hands are really tied, just like the examples I gave a minute ago about city council trying to, how are you going to allocate funds for certain things? And so there are a few cities out there that do a great job with an internal group that do that. And then, like you said, parking authorities, the history of parking authorities is more up in the Northeast. I think almost every single Pennsylvania town has a parking authority or something. So as it's gone over the years, a lot of those started in the 40s or whatever, and over the years, I think it's evolved more to be less about ordinances and rules and more governmental in the approach, to a little bit more user-friendly. And then all along the way, as this industry has gotten better and moved a little bit away from cash, and then there's been, theft issues. So technology does two things. It gives you a lot of auditing options as well as better customer service. So I think that sort of movement towards better customer service, better auditing, more use of data and all of that has managed to work its way into some of these more forward-thinking parking authorities that you're seeing, like you mentioned, out west. And but I'd love to see a heat map sometime about where are parking authorities, because it would be super red up in the Northeast, and then it's scattered down. You've got Miami that does a great job, and us in Louisville kind of here in the middle, and then like you said, Tempe. I'm not really familiar with how many actual true parking authorities there are, like west of the Mississippi or something.
I feel like they kind of went out of fashion for a little while, just because the thought process was that they were not the type of organization you wanted, but you're starting to see them come back in vogue a little bit, because people see what you and Louisville and Miami are doing and the benefit that it's creating. Louisville, or not Louisville, but Miami is an interesting one. I did a little research on them recently, and they're a much bigger organization.
Certainly.
They have a lot of folks, and Alex and Art and all those, they do a really great job down there managing that. But they're also still very tied to the city. I mean, they submit quite a bit of revenue back to the city. And my understanding with the Lexington Parking Authority is it's all self-sustaining enterprise. You keep everything.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And sometimes you'll see people set it up as an enterprise, truly an enterprise, or sometimes it functions underneath like a downtown organization. Ann Arbor, it's under the Downtown Development Authority, I believe. So there's a few different examples of that where you're allowed to be a little bit more of an enterprise. But yes, that's when in a big city where you're mostly meter oriented and maybe you don't have as many garages to support and fund, there can be a serious excess of revenue. Expenses are much less in a meter operation. So a lot of times when cities know of that, they're wanting to glean off the top or say, hey, you got to fund our pension, and that's what a lot of our parking authorities are busy doing. In our case, maybe in some ways we are more advanced in our thinking, but then maybe the city might be a little bit unaware of the potential. And hopefully nobody from Lexington listens to this, but we have earmarked our funds to go back to keeping the garages going. So from day one, our parking authority now is about 13 years old in real activity. We've never needed any money from the city. We've never stood in front of city council and said, hey, we need this. We've not even needed money for the big millions of dollars of infrastructure work that we've put on the garages. So it's an example of what can happen when you set up a professional organization that's a little bit more nimble. We're still governmental at an arm's reach. We don't have to pay sales tax, that kind of thing. But we can make decisions that are more business-minded. Should we do this or not? How's that going to affect the bottom line? And that's not always the case when it's more of a city or more embedded in the city.
That's right. And I don't think enough can be said about, taking that burden of maintenance, upgrades, fixing the parking facilities helps the city. Like, again, because when you're making the decision between hiring more police staff or upgrading the garage, 10 times out of 10, we're going to hire more police staff because it's customer driven and needed, right? Now you've separated that. You're handling that. And y'all do a really good job. I mean, your garages, the transformation you've done over the time that you've had them under the parking authority has been really strong. I mean, you've done a good job of making them look good, inviting, education, marketing, all those types of things. And that goes a long way for the customer experience too. So, I mean, I think that's good. There's other things y'all do. I'm always impressed by kind of like the marketing campaigns that y'all are doing with the parking authority and spending money that way, because education about the use of the system is critically important, and the customer experience. I mean, that just you really can't understate that.
An interesting thing about the way our organization has evolved and what our place or our footprint in our downtown market is in terms of marketing. Early on, all of our marketing was educational. You can't feed the meter. Early on, we were saying, hey, we don't want to call these parking enforcement PEOs and things like that, so we call them ambassadors, and they're going to be out there to help you find parking or give you instructions on where a good restaurant might be as well. So a lot of that was where we were early on. Here's an interesting sort of transition. Our current marketing campaign, so to speak, is helping us fill spaces on nights and weekends. So we've kind of evolved to the place where we still, I'm not saying we won't do educational, but now we truly are actually marketing our product. We're saying, hey, we've got well-lit, safe garages, and there's a lot of spaces at night when things have died down from daytime activity. I think it's a situation that a lot of folks in an urban environment are dealing with, where it's maybe even full. You can't take more business during the day, but then everybody goes home, and now it's just night, bars and restaurants and things like that, and you've got a lot of spaces. So we've shifted our marketing now a little bit to actual true marketing to say, hey, look what we've got, and it's affordable, safe, well lit, that kind of thing.
Well, it's all about advancing behavior change. Like the original education is behavior change around using the system right. Now the behavior change is let's sprinkle to the places that we need you to be, which then creates more revenue, which helps support the garages, which helps support the program. So it's a virtuous cycle there.
Right.
So it's really good. As we're talking about organizational models, one of the other ones that I've seen that's kind of in the industry today that a lot of people are talking about, and you see like Robert Farron up in Columbus kind of thinking about this in his districts, is kind of the management district, right? So benefit district, management district, where it's still a city-run organization, but the funds are reinvested back into that district. What are your thoughts on the management of the benefit district?
I think it's really whatever comes first. If there's a good business improvement district in place, and then they want to start to take on some parking, initiatives, that works well. In our case, we were ahead of a business improvement district, so we have what we call a downtown management district. They came along after we were, so we partner. We work hand in hand. In our ordinances, there could even be taxing districts created if it came to that, if you wanted to do that for, say, some of the neighborhood improvements, like some of the things that Robert is doing, to allocate some funds towards specific things. We could do that. It just hasn't come up yet. Our residential permit parking program works really well. We haven't really got into sort of, I think, what might be a next phase in residential areas is the introduction of paid parking when you can prove that this has worked so well. Before before a parking permit program was in place, it was, say, 100% occupied or 80% occupied. Now you've got 60% because we've done such a great job with enforcement. So maybe you could sell a few more spaces, put some money back into that neighborhood. I think we're evolving to a place where we might start to look at something like that.
Yeah, and that's where Robert's at.
Right.
He's high intensity, Short North District,
Exactly.
adjacent to a major university. Sounds like a lot of similarities right there.
We've got a lot of that.
You do. So, well, that's interesting. So, you're obviously keeping busy in Lexington with all the fun things you're doing, and then just in your free time as a hobby, you're also the chair-elect of the IPMI Board of Directors, and you've been heavily involved with IPMI for the last 10 years. So, tell me about your role as chair-elect and what's coming up. And so, you will be the chair at this year's conference. After this year's conference?
No. So I am chair-elect for 2 years, and that just happened 6 months ago.
Okay.
So I'm about a year and a half away from taking over chair. And just sort of the way when you think about it in terms of conferences goes, Romy is now past chair. At the end of the last conference, Dave Honorato took over.
That's right, yeah.
So Dave will be chair in San Antonio, and then we go to Tampa after that. So that'll be his 2 years. Then we go to Toronto, which I'm super excited to become the chair in a truly international setup. Especially if you go back to my upbringing and being a military brat. We lived overseas, and I just have a heart and a passion for the fact that IPMI really is international. This will be a great opportunity. Not that we don't embrace it. I mean, we have, I think, 30-something countries that come when we're in the U.S., but to go to Toronto is going to be pretty exciting and a great opportunity to get to take over. So I'm super honored to just be in that role. So the election to just be on the board, when that happens for anyone, it's an honor because you're selected of the peers of the membership. And then once you're on the board, to receive an office like treasurer or chair-elect or chair comes from a vote amongst the board members. And again, extremely honored. I mean, here's this little guy from Lexington, Kentucky that the rest of the board saw fit to, give me that vote. So yeah, I'm super excited. So that'll happen in about a year and a half.
You're engaged in the board and chair-elect at a really exciting time for the organization and for the industry. I mean, we are dipping our toes into a lot of different areas and expanding pretty rapidly, and there's a lot of really smart people that are doing some fun things there. What excites you the most about what's going on with the industry right now?
Right. So again, you kind of talked about the window or the era that we're in, and I know this has been talked about a lot lately, but just adding mobility to the IPMI name says a lot about where this organization thinks the industry is going, and I fully embrace that. What is really interesting, I like to talk about is sometimes if you listen to me talk, you might think that I'm not as progressive thinking in terms of multimodal and transportation, but as you know, the reality is there's still a lot of towns that haven't put in paid parking yet. They're trying to figure out what kind of meter they want to put in, and then on the other end of the spectrum is cities that are pulling out meters and thinking about mobile pay only.
Right.
But all that's going on. Yeah. And as an organization, we've got to provide training and support for whatever part of that spectrum you're on. And there's still a lot of what you might think old school sort of setups that need education, training, support, the opportunity to go to a great conference to see what kind of hardware and more so now software options are out there. So there's this sort of current need that still exists, and then the future. And so you asked where I think the future is going. Something that I got to do recently at 25 years in the parking industry, I wrote my first scooter parking citation. So, we're all talking a little bit about micromobility and shared vehicles and things like that. But yep, in Lexington, we watched a lot of other cities not do it right and said, we don't want it to look like that. We don't want it to look like that. I was involved with a task force that helped write the permit that a scooter company would have to apply for and fill out and agree to before they could come into the community, and not without going into a lot of the weeds. Basically, there's a lot of teeth in that permit. If you don't do a lot of things right, you're out. So they can only bring in a certain amount of scooters. They can only add if they average 4 rides per day. So it's a model that says, hey, if you're successful, we'll let you bring in more, but you need to be successful. And then the rebalancing and parking is huge. That has to be written correctly, and when it is, I have written our citation for either staying somewhere you shouldn't be for too long or being parked where you shouldn't be after a warning is $500.
Wow. Okay.
I wrote 4 for $500. We actually got paid $2,000. I've never done that before in my life. Hopefully, I don't have to do it. It's not really something that we're trying to see as a new revenue source. They just need to behave correctly and get their rebalancing act together. And scooters can be, a nice add-on if controlled correctly. So again, there's models in all of this new shared economy and even in the TNC world where certain things don't work well at all, and then there's some models where some things work well, and that's what we need to promote is some of these things that are working well to help other communities be able to not have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. I think it's really interesting. I mean, to the point that there are cities out there today that are they're not New York City, they're not Seattle, they're not San Francisco, right? One of the things I think we're all doing at IPMI that's really, really interesting is beginning to document like what those cities are doing, where they stub their toes, the lessons we've learned, so that second tier cities, mid-sized cities don't have to go through the growing pains. And your scooter example is a great example. Like I've seen a lot of cities that wrestled with 2,000 electric scooters being dropped on their city, and what do I do with this? And now everybody has a model for that, and we keep partnering and working together. I think that's going to be kind of critical. And the scooters are great. I mean, they're an equitable solution to first and last mile problems, and really can help people move around and solve some of the parking challenges that we have if they're done right. So kudos for putting that together. That's all kind of in the here and now.
Right.
Are there things about the future of our industry that scare you or excite you, and what could come next?
It's so interesting how unexpectedly fast changes occur. And when you ask me the question, and I think about this a lot, like what's next? Where do we see? In my own sort of simple mind, I have a hard time seeing how do we get from where we are to where we're all talking about we think we're going to be. So an example would be, I really truly believe at some point you're going to have sensors on curbs that are connected to connected vehicles. If you pull up to the curb, you get a bill. But
no matter who you are,
no matter who,
a car,
UPS, FedEx,
DoorDash,
TNC,
whatever,
exactly. So what I think we have to do, and other people are saying that, is you start to plan for that with things like the more use of LPR or a gateless facility when it makes sense, which we've done, and we're learning a lot about that. How to use cameras in an on-street to get counts or track plates, or be able to possibly send a bill like what already is happening when you go over a bridge or a toll road where what if the camera model is something that helps bridge this sort of until we get to the sensors that are talking to each other. Then you've got to deal with street trees and things that block cameras. So there's just so much that we have to try to work through. But I think early on it's trying to figure out what are the rules of your curb today, digitizing that if you can, to start to plan for this demand that's happening at the curb. And we're all talking about curb management. There's this real gap, I think, between what we really are doing now and what could be done in terms of software and connected and in-dash models that are coming with the vehicles. And I'm not smart enough to see that bridge right now and see that gap. I know it's coming. That's where I think we're going. And I think to answer the question, today we should be thinking about what really are the uses of our curb, what are our needs, and some simple things like we're doing in Lexington is creating pickup and drop off areas after hours. So our meters currently we don't enforce after 5 p.m. We are thinking about extending that, but whether we do or we don't, the pickup and drop off time for bars might not start until 10 to 2 a.m. or something like that. Could there be a sign, and we've done that on a group of meters where at this time it's only pick up and drop off. You can't camp out there. And so the police like that. It also gets that sort of out in the street pick up and drop off that's going on if someone doesn't have a place to pull over and queue. So it's a safety thing, but it's a curb management move that's really kind of, it's more old school. It's just signs and enforcement, but you have to be thinking outside of that normal meter box or after hour box. And I think there's just a lot of that where you're going to have multi-uses throughout the day of curb line.
That's right. And this goes back to the work that you've done at the Parking Authority, but the education, the behavioral change part of it, we've got to start shaping the expectations of our customers to meet the vision of what we want the curb, the city, the parking system, the transportation system to do. And we do that through all of these little incremental changes. And they don't need to know about the technology that's going to drive all of it, but they do need to know about the purpose and the benefit to them. And so it's exciting to see us start doing those things as an industry.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
Another little example of curb management that we're dealing with, we have the authority to set up valet zones. So we have a few valet zones in downtown Lexington, and I was talking to one of the groups, how are things going? And they hadn't told me this, but it makes so much sense. They're at a really nice restaurant, and nearby is like a pizza place, and in another place, well, a lot of times these Uber Eats and DoorDashes are whipping into the valet zone because that's the only place they can find to park, and the guys are trying, it's almost like turn into a fight to try to say, no, this is my spot. So we need to think about, well, maybe back a couple more spaces, we create this, pick up and drop off zone there. So it's just things like that are starting to happen. We've got to figure out how to sort of tackle it ahead of time. And at some point there'll be a app for that.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps more partnership between those entities, the valet companies and the food deliveries. I mean, we're talking about 15-second transactions or 1-minute transactions versus, drop off and being there for a couple of hours. Certainly there's got to be a way that we can make those things work together seamlessly at the curb. But all the fun things we get paid to do. So, yeah. Well, this has been fascinating. I appreciate your time today. I'm really looking forward to, your role as the chair-elect and then the chair. I'm also looking forward to Toronto.
That'll be great.
Fabulous city. So a great place for you to take the reins. And, thanks a bunch for doing this today, and thanks for everything you're doing for the industry.
I really appreciate it, and I've been honored to have this conversation with you.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Parker X podcast. We sincerely appreciate it and hope you are enjoying our content. Please remember to rate, review, comment, subscribe, and share. And follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. The following has been a production of Parker X.